Is this what we've been waiting for Bitcoin? We have an absolute explosion in the price of Bitcoin, as you can see, going right back to our resistance level in a straight up candle on the day. Folks, is this the breakout moment for Bitcoin? Or is there more disappointment ahead? And why did this happen? Well, let's make it clear. This is happening because we finally had a judge put the SEC in their place on BTC, but it doesn't end the door or end the fight for actually getting a Bitcoin spot ETF approved. In fact, this is just one of many parts in the fight. Let me try to catch you up to speed as simply as possible. Basically, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust has Bitcoin as assets in their company, and they're listed on the stock market as an investment trust. You have to be an accredited investor to get into. And because of the lack of ability to get in and out of this fund, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust trades at a discount to the value of the Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin is worth more than what the company is trading for. And so the company's like, turn us into an ETF already so people can just buy Bitcoin through an exchange traded fund, and they don't have to worry about blockchain, ledger backup systems, hard wallets, whatever. They don't have to worry about their coins, none of that. Now, of course, to some extent, you could make the argument that, well, first of all, not your keys, not your crypto, and you should want your keys, right? And that's fair. Many people in crypto, no, we want our keys, thank you very much. But there are huge swaths of the industry, especially from an institutional investor point of view, where people want Bitcoin as a hedge, but they can't buy it because they need it to be in an ETF vehicle. I'll give you an example. My ETF, because I run an actively managed ETF, could buy a Bitcoin ETF as a hedge to other stocks that we have, but we can't buy Bitcoin directly. So, of course, the Bitcoin community says, this would be great if we get a spot ETF. There's going to be so much more demand for Bitcoin. And you'll actually see this arbitrage opportunity clear at the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, which will make a lot of people a lot of money. Now, it's worth noting that there's been a lot of speculation and excitement that, hey, this ETF approval is near, that, companies like BlackRock are going to file for a Bitcoin ETF only to get denied. So it seems like the pressure is really building on the SEC, and eventually it's going to, culminate in basically a listed ETF. That's unfortunately not what we have right now. We have just another step in the process. We're closer, but not there yet. Keep in mind, the SEC has gone into Bitcoin as saying, hey, look, we don't need another digital currency. This is Gary Gensler specifically. I shouldn't say that on behalf of the entire SEC, since there are probably people at the SEC who feel otherwise. But Gary Gensler himself said, hey, we don't need another digital currency. We got the US dollar. That's digital. You can digitally send that money all day long. What do you need Bitcoin for? This has led a lot of people to have a sour taste in their mouth for the SEC because they think potentially the SEC is embarking on a sort of political or a dollar protecting sort of mission rather than, or crusade maybe might be the word, rather than actually applying the law equally. And that is actually exactly what the judge just said in this court ruling where the SEC got a little bit of a slap. Now, I want to explain this slap because, again, it's not a clear approval. And I'm going to keep this as simple as possible because I read this entire ruling and it is complicated. So we're going to simplify it and then we'll get to the gist of it. Keep in mind, we've got courses on building your wealth. We've got an expiring coupon code in 2 days on that. That's the 31st. That is also able to be applied to the financial advice that we give for putting me in your situation and then advising, hey, what would I do in your shoes as you, as legal financial advice to either diversify or undiversify or do this with your job or your properties or LLCs or this, that, or whatever. We can actually give real financial advice because I'm a licensed financial advisor. Anyway, so let's go into this ruling over here. I'm going to start at the back because it's a little easier. So at the back, you're going to see, in the absence of a coherent explanation, this, unlike regulatory treatment of like products, is unlawful We therefore grant Grayscale's petition for review and vacate the commissioner's order. Okay, nobody's gonna understand that line. So let's try simple words here. And again, I read the whole ruling, so I'm going to just simplify this. Basically, here's Grayscale, and this is Grayscale, and they have a product called an exchange-traded product, an ETP, like an ETF, okay? In order to list this on something like a stock exchange, like we'll call it NYSE, and then the New York Stock Exchange for ETFs is the ARCA division, so NYSE ARCA. In order to list on the NYSE ARCA exchange, you must be qualified, I'll just put qual, by the regulator, okay? So we're gonna call this the regulator. There we go, and that is the SEC. So in other words, the SEC has to bless your documents before you can go list on the exchange. And what's basically happened is other companies have come forward and said, hey, look, we're another company here, like the Valkyrie Trust or whatever, and we have a product called a Bitcoin Futures ETF, which we would like to list on the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And the SEC has said to this, yeah, okay, we're okay with that. So the SEC said okay to listing a Bitcoin Futures ETF, which is basically a contract, right? It's not actually Bitcoin, it's a contract. The SEC has said okay to this, but here they've said no, thank you. In other words, we won't review, thereby blocking your access to getting into ARCA. Now, this court ruling does not say you are green lit to get onto ARCA. In fact, all this does is say, hey, SEC, you need to continue this process right here, this qualification process. You can't just stand in the way and say, you know what, we just decided to not even go that far. Forget about you getting listed on ARCA. We're not even going to go that far because we're not even going to approve, we're not even going to review your Bitcoin ETF filing. So the SEC's put that X there, that blockade, and this court ruling is saying, no, you need to give them the same review process as you gave others. That's really what this court review is saying. And the reason they make this argument is throughout the various different pages of this document, of this ruling, they say that there are really two prongs for determining whether a fund like a Bitcoin ETF should exist or not. And really, the biggest piece that the SEC seems worried about, or the biggest two pieces, I'm going to write them down, are price discovery and fraud. Those are the two big pieces. Now, again, this is a nearly 30-page document going into all of the specific details of this, but I'm going to give you the simplified version here. Price discovery is basically saying, look, if that Grayscale ETF is going to buy Bitcoin and shares of that ETF are going to be listed on the NYSE, on the ARCA fund, then the more money that flows into the ETF, the more Bitcoin that ETF has to go control. And we don't want this ETF controlling too much of the Bitcoin market to where all of a sudden the Bitcoin market is being influenced by the ETF. So that's one thing, not having a disproportionate share of the market. So we'll call this, we'll say, not too big of a market impact. And it's the SEC's responsibility to prove with an explanation that what Coinbase is saying, or not Coinbase, that what Grayscale is saying is untrue. So Grayscale is saying, look, one, we're not too big. We're not going to have too big of a market impact. We're not going to affect the underlying value of Bitcoin that much. So that's not a big deal. And it's the SEC's responsibility to, I guess I shouldn't say prove, but respond with a coherent explanation to that claim, which so far they haven't done enough for the judge to be happy of. And keep that in mind. So again, Grayscale, hey, we're not going to impact the market with this ETF. Okay, great. The second thing is we won't be affected by fraud. That's a big deal that the SEC wants. Is the SEC wants to see, like, if someone on the blockchain gets hacked and there's some fraud, is that going to affect the ETF and therefore the investors in the ETF? And then the third thing they're looking for outside of price discovery, or rather market impact from the ETF on pricing and fraud, the third thing is fair pricing. So that's different from the market impact. This is really where Grayscale says, look, when we study the market, we find that the prices we can get have a 99% match to the market rate, the spot rate of Bitcoin. Now, that's really important because really Grayscale is telling you, hey, look, we believe that we are not going to be affected by fraud. We believe we're not going to have too big of a market impact. And we believe, based on the studies and research we provide, that we're not going to get, distorted pricing. We're going to be able to get fair spot pricing for this ETF. Now, here it is in the judge's words. Number one, the SEC does not indicate that fraud would actually impact the spot price of Bitcoin. In other words, the judge here is saying, like, all right, SEC, if you're going to block them because you're worried about fraud, prove it. The second thing, they say the spot market and futures market are so tightly correlated, you have to prove that there's a D-link between these two, the futures market and actual Bitcoin, because remember, you have approved and been okay with a futures ETF. So why are you okay with the futures ETF but not the spot one? That violates something known as the Administrative Procedures Act, where you're not applying the law equally to similar products. So that pisses the judge off. That's where the judge here, number 3, says the commission failed to treat cases alike. And here the judge argues in 2 different paragraphs, hey, look, we're also not convinced that just because Grayscale has an ETF, they're not going to get spot prices, or they're going to have too much of a predominant influence on prices. In other words, the judge is basically saying, look, the reasons you gave for not approving this ETF are not good enough. And therefore, you need to go back and make sure you provide better reasons or approve it. Unfortunately, my expectation is that the SEC is going to say, all right, we'll rewrite it and provide a bunch of new reasons. So in other words, they'll just deny Grayscale again. They could really kick the can down the road on this for another year plus. That's possible. Unless the SEC has a change of heart and they're like, you know what, this isn't worth the fight, then they might end up approving it, which would be obviously very bullish for the future of BTC. But in the near term, this doesn't get us as close to a Bitcoin ETF as I think the market is hoping, as the SEC could, if they wanted to, drag this out for a very long period of time. So hopefully that's a useful explanation. If you like my sort of explanation, consider subscribing. If you like the way I explain things, check out the programs on Building Your Wealth link down below, or check out my new financial advice offering, stackhack.com or meetkevin.com for the courses, and email us for bundles at staff@meetkevin.com. Thanks. Goodbye.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
To which I say, yes, meet Kevin.
Where does this mean we are in the economic cycle? Should we be thinking about buying real estate? Should we be thinking about buying stocks? I have a background in real estate as a real estate agent, real estate broker, real estate investor, a stock market investor, and fund manager.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here?
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Always great to have you on. Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber, Meet Kev.